Matthew 1 starts with the genealogy of Jesus, tracing his lineage from Abraham through King David to Joseph, the husband of Mary. Many people leave out reading 1:17. However, this genealogy is crucial because this structure underscores Jesus' role in fulfilling God's promises. The genealogy is divided into 3 sets of 14 generations, from Abraham to David, from David to the Babylonian exile, and from the exile to Jesus. So in total, there are 42 generations, and for science fiction fans, this is what explains why the number 42 is considered to be the answer to life, the universe, and all the rest. By beginning with Abraham, Matthew emphasizes that Jesus is the fulfillment of God's covenant with Abraham. Through David, the genealogy underscores Jesus' royal lineage, although this has to be understood in a spiritual way as linking Jesus to the everlasting kingdom. This genealogy teaches us that God's plan unfolds through generations, often in unexpected ways, using a diverse range of people. Moving on to verses 18-25, Matthew describes the circumstances surrounding Jesus' birth. The virgin birth has to be understood in a symbolic way and not in its literal meaning. The virgin birth symbolizes a miraculous event, indicating God's direct intervention in human history. This miracle is meant to demonstrate God's power and the unique nature of Jesus' mission. It is interesting to notice that only Matthew and Luke provide a narrative of the virgin birth. The Gospel of Mark does not mention the virgin birth, omitting any account of Jesus' birth or childhood. The Gospel of John also does not mention the virgin birth. Instead, it starts with a theological prologue about the word logos. This can be explained by the following: myth and symbolism. Many ancient cultures have myths of miraculous births to signify the special nature of a leader. The story can be understood as a way to convey Jesus' unique status and divine mission using familiar mythological motifs. The story of Mary serves theological purposes rather than historical reporting. Later addition to the Gospel, another explanation is that the narrative was a later addition by the early Christian community to emphasize Jesus' divinity. It might have been created to fulfill Old Testament prophecies, such as Isaiah 7:14. Translation and interpretation issues, however. Some argue that the virgin birth story stems from a mistranslation of Hebrew texts. The Hebrew word alma, young woman, in Isaiah 7:14 was translated into the Greek parthenos, virgin, which the Gospel writers used. This could have led to the belief in a virgin birth. Historical context: stories of divine or miraculous births were common in the ancient world. They were used to signify the extraordinary nature of a person. The stories of Alexander the Great, Augustus Caesar, and others include similar miraculous birth narratives. Resolving social situations. Some theologians suggest that the story was a cover for a socially problematic situation back in that time, such as premarital pregnancy. They argue that the claim of a virgin birth could have been a way to protect Mary and Jesus from social stigma. The name Jesus is the Greek form of Joshua, which means the Lord saves. This name reflects Jesus' mission to save humanity from sin. Another name for Jesus is Emmanuel, meaning God with us. This fulfillment of prophecy underscores that Jesus is the awaited Messiah who brings God's presence into the world in a new and transformative way. No matter if you believe in the literal meaning of the Virgin Mary, or rather in the symbolic interpretation, Joseph's response to the angelic message is one of obedience and faith. Joseph aligns himself with God's plan, and his actions demonstrate the importance of trust and obedience in the face of divine revelation. Matthew 1 powerfully introduces the dual nature of Jesus as both human and divine. The genealogy roots Jesus firmly in human history, while the account of his miraculous birth, whether taken literally or symbolically, points to his divine origin. Joseph's obedience serves as a model for all believers. His willingness to follow God's instructions, despite the social and personal risks, demonstrates the importance of aligning our lives with God's purposes. Matthew 1 lays the groundwork for the gospel by establishing Jesus' credentials, highlighting God's faithfulness in fulfilling his promises, and introducing key themes of grace, redemption, and divine presence. It sets the stage for the unfolding narrative of Jesus' teachings. As we reflect on this chapter, let's consider how we can recognize God's work in our own stories, trust in his promises, and embrace the transformative power of God with us. Do you have any stories to share where you experienced the presence of God